Hey everybody, today we're going to be doing a brake job on a 2017 Ford Transit. I do believe since this latest generation of Transit started, none of the parts have changed up front, but don't quote me, you're going to have to look that thing up for yourself for your specific year of Transit. We're going to be doing the front brake rotors, wheel bearings, brake pads, and relube the caliper slides and all that stuff. We're going to go over some stuff that you will need before you get started on this job. So before you even loosen a lug nut, you're going to want to have these tools. Starting with some way to hold your brake caliper. You can get these guys off of Amazon, a set of 4 for like $10. You don't necessarily have to use these. You can use, mechanics wire, baling wire, zip ties, anything, but you need to have a way to hang your caliper off of something on the vehicle to where no weight is being put on your brake hoses before you ever loosen the brake caliper bolts. Another thing you're going to need to do the brakes on a Ford Transit is you will need some type of longer reach. I prefer an impact T50. These bolts are going to be on there pretty snug. The factory Ford bolts come with Loctite. And we're going to be replacing those bolts, and I'll get to those here in a second. But you will need a longer T50. I'd prefer you go down to at least Harbor Freight and go pick you up a set of the Pittsburgh Torx Drive 1/2 inch drive. You will need, a 21 millimeter socket. That is the size of your front lug nuts. If you have the nicer upgraded wheels, you're going to have trouble with the chrome sockets. You might have more luck with a 22. Matco makes some chrome buster sockets that are half sized over, but if not, you can probably get by with a 22 if those lug nuts have been taken off once or twice and that chrome starts to loosen itself up. You will need a torque wrench. It's very important that we use a torque wrench when we tighten down anything on brakes or on wheels. So a 1/2 inch torque wrench that goes up to 200 foot-pounds and down to 50 will be important. You will also need probably a 3/8 torque wrench that goes down to about 20, because I do believe the brake rotor wheel bearing bolts are 46 foot-pounds, and the brake rotor bolts are torqued to yield. They get torqued to 20 foot-pounds and then turned 90 degrees. So you're going to need those tools before you ever try this on your own. You're also going to need a floor jack, a good set of jack stands, at least 3 ton or above. I prefer 6 tons. I think that's about all the specialty tools we're going to need. Now let's talk about the parts we're going to need. Everything on the Transit's wheels, or from the suspension and wheels in, are one-time use fasteners. Everything but the lug nuts, which I'm waiting for that one day. You will need to replace your brake caliper bracket bolts. You will need to replace your brake rotor bolts. You will need to replace your brake wheel bearing hub bolts. And you'll also need to replace your caliper slide bolts. You can get the kit from Ford, which is a new caliper slide and the bolts all together. All of those are one-time use fasteners. Now I know you're thinking, well, I did brakes back in the 90s and we didn't have to do that. We just wire brushed them, cleaned them, put some Loctite on them, and torqued them to spec, right? Now, that's not the way it is anymore. Pretty much any new vehicle uses one-time fasteners on the suspension. So all of these bolts are going to need to be replaced. That's my advice. If you decide to wire brush them and put some Loctite on them and send them home on torque to spec, the only ones you definitely can't do that on are the brake rotor bolts, because those get torqued to yield. They get torqued to 20 foot-pounds and then taken to 90 degrees, and you can feel those bolts stretch when you tighten them. So definitely at minimum replace those, but I recommend you replace all of them, and you're not doing it the proper way unless you replace all of them. I work on ambulances, so I will never open myself up to be sued because the service manual said me to do one thing and I did another. So follow my advice on that, please, and just replace the one-time use fasteners. So let's get started on this and we'll show you all the parts you're going to need. Okay, so here in front of us is everything that we should need to do this job. We've got our brake rotor. We're replacing the wheel bearings in this truck. You don't have to replace wheel bearings when you do your brake rotor, when your brake job. We've got our seat clamp, got something to remove the tires off and other stuff. We've got our 4 wear pads that come with our Ford brake pad kit, as well as the 2 caliper slide bolts. That comes with the Ford brake pad kit. We've got our 2 brake pads, got some paper towels, a couple torque wrenches, and a 1/2-inch ratchet. These right here are our brake rotor bolts. We've got our wheel bearing bolts, our 2 caliper slide bolts. We've got our T50 to remove the brake rotor. We have our 13mm to remove the brake rotor from the wheel bearing. And we have our 15mm, I believe it is. I might have grabbed the wrong size for the brake caliper slide bolts. And like I said, we got our 2 torque wrenches. So let's get started on this. So this is a pretty simple job. First, we're going to start with getting our brake caliper out of the way, which yes is a 15mm. Hook. We're gonna hang this guy right here. That way, when this caliper comes off, it can go straight to the hook and no weight's ever put on it. These guys like to spin on you. You can also hold them with a crescent wrench if they're really on there. Pull the caliper off. It's going to go straight on to our hook, so no weight is hanging on it. These go in the trash. Take our 21. Caliper bracket bolts out of there. These go in the trash. And then, just to make it easy, you want to have your ignition on the first click, so the steering wheel is unlocked. I'm going to take our T50. First, put it in the hole, kind of spin the wheel bearing, and move it around until you can find it by feel. The bolts are going forward, and then don't move the rotor assembly again. Or else you have to go find it again. This is why you need a long one. On this last one, hold it. All comes off. Now for me, that whole assembly is going to go in the trash with all of its hardware because I'm replacing the brake rotor, brake wheel bearing and the brake rotor. But it's at this point, you would, if you're going to machine your brake rotor, take it to go get machined. At the dealer, they just do this on car, that way they don't have to waste all the money on the hardware. They use an on-car brake rotor. But real quick, before we forget anything, let's clean this whole area real well. Now generally there's not a whole lot here, but if you're in the northern states, you may want to take a wire brush to this, or a wire wheel. But we want to clean out and degrease the holes where the wheel bearing hub bolts go. That way our new Loctite. We want to clean these holes out. That way our Loctite that's on our new bolts will adhere to the knuckle well. Clean this whole area real well. That way the new wheel bearing or your old wheel bearing centers well in there and you don't have any alignment issues or anything like that. Remember, these 5 bolts right here literally hold the entire wheel on to the vehicle. So I want to make sure everything's done right. You're also going to want to spray these guys out. Make sure you don't get any foreign bodies into the threads of your caliper bracket, and then just give the whole thing a good reset. Like I said, if you were going to be reusing your old wheel bearings or your old rotors, you'd be separating them now with the 5 13mm bolts there. But for us, we're not doing that. We've got new rotors and new wheel bearings. So these guys just sit down right inside there, and then we'll put our bolts in, which are these guys from Ford. They are torque to yield, and they come with a ton of blue Loctite already on them. Now I've got my rotor and wheel bearing hub put together with the bolts loosely on, just so they're nice. Now they're just ran in, they're not tight. We'll tighten them here in a little bit. Before you put this on, make sure your ABS sensor here doesn't have a whole lot of metal stuck to it, because it reads on this tone ring that's built into the wheel bearing. Take your 5 Torx bolts, your wheel bearing bolts again. You'll see that they come with their own type of Loctite already on it. Now what I like to do to get this started is to just take my bit, put it on there. You're going to want to turn this guy until it's lined up with the hole in the hub. This assembly is pretty heavy. Run it through. That way you can get this one up into the hole. Push this guy up there and get it started. Do the one at the top. I just take my impact on its lowest setting just to run it in. There we go. It's still way below its torque spec. And we'll just get these other 4 started. And after that, we'll torque all these guys down. Alright, now we'll torque those guys to spec at 46 foot-pounds. Now we're going to take the chance to get our brake rotor nice and clean. Do a clean paper towel. Get all of the preventative stuff they put on here to keep it from rusting and shipping. Get it nice and clean, that way when the brake pads grab for the first time, they can seat real well. Alright, now we're going to turn our attention to the caliper bracket. Here's our caliper bracket. You're going to want to take your caliper slide pins out. The one with the plastic goes towards the bottom. Keep that in mind. We're going to clean these guys off until they're nice and clean. We're going to clean out our boots, get all the old grease out of them. We're going to clean out these bores, use a pipe cleaner, some brake parts cleaner, get those nice and shiny and clean. And then we're going to use some good brake caliper grease like Sil Glide, anything like that. A lot of the times the aftermarket brake pads will come with a little bit of caliper slide grease and a little packet on them. and then we're going to put on our wear pads. I'll show you that here in a second, and then we'll get this thing put back on. Another thing you're going to want to do is you're going to clean out these threads. That way your Loctite can hold. Now the Ford bolts do not actually come with Loctite on the caliper bracket bolts. I put a little bit on there just for insurance of my own. I'm kind of one of the people that says that anything breaks gets Loctite on it, but Ford does not call for it, but I put it on there. Okay, so we've got our brake caliper. Our pins have been pulled out, or caliper bracket, sorry. Our pins have been pulled out and cleaned and lubed and put all back together. As you can see, we got new wear pads on here. We've cleaned out our threads. So now we're ready to put this guy on. Like I said, the Ford replacement bolts do not come with Loctite on them, but this is just my own preference. And of course, right as I go to do it on camera, the nozzle sticks in the cap. That's about right. So, this is Loctite 243, your medium strength stuff. Just get a little bit on there, a lot. Go ahead and put this caliper bracket back on. I'll go ahead and just turn this way just a bit. Give you guys a better view. Run these guys in, not tightening them with this. These will get tightened to 203 foot-pounds. Alright, caliper brackets are torqued down. Now we're going to take our old brake pads and our seat clamp. Now the other side has not been taken off yet, and that's the way I like to do it. That way I don't push out the other brake caliper. Rest this guy on your leg. Got that guy right there. Put it right in between the two pistons. Just send this guy back home, nice and slow. Okay, it's nice and compressed. Give this guy a quick rinse off. I like to do it so I don't get all the rubber boots all beat to death. Brake parts cleaner. Sure all the contact points you have are nice and clean, like the cups of the disc or the pistons. That way you don't get any bad squeaks or anything. Hang that guy right back there. Do one quick last cleaner before our pads go on, just in case we hit it with our greasy hands. Now the Ford pads, which I like to use, especially because they come with the caliper slide bolts. You don't have to buy those separately, which saves you a little bit of money. This whole pad likes to fall off in shipping, so make sure that's snapped on there. And this right here is why we cleaned real good. If you get any brake dust or anything like that in between this and the caliper, and the caliper moves back and forth, you can get a bad squeak from it. So start like this, put the pad facing up, push those little spring parts down, and swing the pad on in. so you don't have to fight with those wear pads. And there's our caliper on. 2 new bolts. Swing this guy back into position. Might have to push the slide pins in a bit. They already have Loctite on them. These will get torqued to 43 foot-pounds. It'll hold itself. There we go. Like I said, the only part that we haven't torqued down now, brake rotor bolts. I'll show you what I do there. So this is a tool that I forgot to show you guys at the beginning. You got a long, just sharp punch. I like to drop it right down here in the vent of the brake rotor where I can grab both sides of it. You can see I got a good handle on the brake rotor. I just rest it up against the caliper bracket. Now I can torque down all of the brake rotor bolts. We're going to go to first 20 foot-pounds. Star pattern. 20 foot-pounds is not a lot. Now they're all torqued down. And now we go 90 degrees. So what you're going to do is you're going to make a mark with a Sharpie straight up and down at 12 and 6 o'clock, and then put 2 dots at 9 and 3 and turn it until they line up. Alright, as you can see, they've all been torqued 90 degrees. We're ready to put the wheel back on. Wheel lug nut torque is 140 to 150 pounds depending on which model you have.